All right, folks, welcome to the first live Q&A. This is something that we're going to do every 2 weeks. I'm pretty excited about this. Some of you have been asking questions about, can we get to talk to Greg? And the answer is yes, there it is. You don't get to talk to me because we don't get to give you a microphone, but you have a voice in the comments. You can leave a comment with a question that you have. Obviously, if you're studying for ground school, this is for you. I want to make sure that you have a way to get to me and to answer your questions. Some of you leave comments in the videos. There's a lot of these every day, and I answer those every day. But I figured sometimes maybe you want a more live response. So I have my iPad here. I can put some of the figures that you see on the exam. I know some of you have questions. We've also recorded videos of things that for some of the more tricky questions. So this is something that we can do in here. So what I'm going to do is I'll be talking for a little bit. Maybe I'll start to pull some of the questions that are here in the test figures on my iPad. And then from here, we can start a conversation with you guys. And I can see all your comments right here. So type them anytime that you want. I know that there are some confusion on some of the charts. Reading some of the charts is always difficult. Finding the right area in the chart is always difficult. Maybe there's a specific topic that you don't understand, such as class D, class B, whatever it is. We can get over it. I can pull some of the slides as well from the course, and we can go and answer those. So if you can hear me, if you're listening, if you're paying attention, please leave a comment, either if you're watching on YouTube. We also have this available from our student group on Facebook. So make sure that you let us know. I'm gonna show you real quick this document here, and actually this is a question that I answered this morning from someone, and I want to go over it because I feel like sometimes it's a little confusing. So I'm going to show you on my iPad. First off, I'm going to show you this document, which is something that you should have either purchased as a paper version. I have a paper version somewhere in the office. I actually like to have that paper version, but this is also a document that you should be using to prepare using the PDF in itself. So you can download the PDF. It's available in the course, and there is a lot of charts in here. So I'm gonna go to the first few pages here just to show you what's going on. When you start to scroll, you can see here the list of all the different figures that are available. And you can see here, we have a legend at the beginning. And I'm going to talk about that legend because this is something that's always very useful that you may not know that you have available during the exam. And then from here, we can go to all the different figures. Now, be careful. Some people get confused sometimes. They see figure 15, for example, down here. So this is figure 15 right here. Well, guess what? Figure 15 is actually on, well, this one turns out to be on page 15, so it actually works out pretty well. But some of these figures, there you go. Here's a good one. Figure 38 right here actually is on page 35. So don't get confused during the actual exam. That figure is the number, the figure number is what you want to look for. This is what the FAA refers to, not the page number. So from here, let me show you right here the appendix on the first page, and of course it's going to be sideways, but this is still good. On here, what you see is that there is a legend, and sometimes you may have a brain fart. You may have a brain fart where you don't remember what class Delta looks like. Well, look right here. Class Delta, I know it's sideways, but you can still read it. Class Delta is right here. That's your cheat sheet. This is available during the exam. If you ever have a brain fart about what class Echo looks like at the surface, guess what? Class Echo at the surface is right here. Or if there is something that you see on the chart that you don't know what it is, you can go right here and find that. And that is true for a lot of different things. You can see here, there's also a sample. Maybe you're reading the chart supplement and you forgot what somebody asked me this morning. What is this thing here? 173, let me do it in a different color, 173 and 353. They said, I thought that runways were only 2 digits. Yeah, that's correct. Runways are usually 1 or 2 digits, like you see runway 36 down here and runway 18 down here. And they asked me, what is this? Well, guess what? You can go and you can look at number 10 right here, okay? And if we go to the next page and the next page and the next page, and we get to airport sketch, it gives you information here. And then eventually, it's the next page. I think it was on 19. And of course, now that I'm looking at it, I'm not going to find it. Let's see. You know what? This one looks a little bit different. That's why. Okay. So here, runway designation. All right. You see runway designation here for 21. By the way, this has changed. The reason I'm getting confused is because the actual chart supplement is on number 19. But you can see here it says runway may be designated as ultralight or assault strip. And it says assault strip are shown by magnetic bearing. And that's your answer. That's a magnetic bearing. When you see 173, that's a magnetic bearing. That's going to be the information here. So that is designated. The thing I showed you a second ago here, I'm going to scroll back to it. This would be the field that I just mentioned. Okay? Assault field. Thank you. And so, all right, I get on a tangent, but that's your chart supplement. There's a ton of good information here. All this is all available for free during the exam, courtesy of the FAA. So if you have a brain fart, go ahead and use it. And then I wanted to also show on one of the sectional. So I'm going to keep scrolling. I apologize if this is getting dizzy, but I want to get to one of the first charts here where you can actually see. Let's do it this way. It's going to be easier. Let's get to one of these right here. Okay. Now, students ask and they say, how do I measure distances on here? Well, first off, you should have the paper version, which is what you're going to get on the day of the exam, okay? And the way that you measure things is you're going to look at the bottom here. And what you see is there is a chart. There's a scale, I'm sorry. It says 0 nautical miles. And then if you look underneath it, it says statute miles here. And it says kilometers right here. Well, we measure things in nautical miles typically. So the distance between here and here represents 10 nautical miles. So if you had an example where they say you need to go between Garrison Airport, that's right here, and you need to go to Minot International Airport up here, you draw a line between the two, just like this, using your straight edge on your computer. Okay, actually, it's not going to do it correctly. Let's do another example here. Let's go between these two airports. Okay, then you will measure the distance using your ruler or using a piece of paper, quite frankly. You could just use a piece of paper, put a tick mark, put in a tick mark, and then go to the bottom of the page here to the scale and then report that distance and then measure how long it was. It's really that simple. It really is that simple. So make sure you use that during the exam. That's going to be, it's a question that we get quite a bit. Okay, I see some questions popping up. I'm going to go with the first one. This is from Mike, and he says, what do you think is the best way to find an instructor to start training on my own airplane? Oh, that is a good question. I would recommend actually going to talk to your local flight school. If you have a flight school at the airport, I would recommend going to talk to them and see if they have anyone available that you can use and they'll charge you a fee, obviously an hourly fee, to do that training. And that's probably the best place where you can find someone qualified. Now, I don't know what aircraft you have, Mike, but some aircraft require a bit more experience because they're a bit more less traditional. If you have a 172, then it should be pretty easy to find someone. I did that for a while. I was flight instructing a lady that had a Cherokee 140 with the other small Hershey wings, and I did that on the side for her. You got to be careful. Some flight schools don't allow instructors to work on their own at the field. So this was a rule that I had at one of the flight school I managed. They couldn't hire our instructors on the site, so they did it through us, and we were happy to do that. So I said, I'm working getting 150. 150 is pretty traditional. You'll see a lot of people that can fly those. So I would say either you do that, or another thing you can do is on the weekend, if you have, I don't know how big your airport is, but if there is some hangars out there, try to go and talk to someone at the airport and see somebody who's working on their airplane in the hangar. See if you can go talk to them and say, hey, do you know anyone who's flight instructing around here? It's a pretty small community, typically at airports. And if somebody does work on the side, they'll do that. There's another thing that you can do as well. There's an app called Instruct Air, instead of instructor, Instruct Air at the end, AIR.com. And in there, you can actually put requests for a specific area, and then those requests will be sent by the app to instructors that are in the app that decide to do that. So those are 3 different options that you can do. I would definitely recommend doing that. 150 should not be a problem to find someone to do that on the side. Okay, let's go to YouTube. There's a question here. It says, the aviator says, I have a question. I'm 15 years old and I was wondering when I should start actual flight training to get my PPL. When I turn 17. I'm in 9th grade in high school. That's a great question. That's a great time to do your training. Here's what I would recommend. You can do your first solo at 16. If you're young and sharp, you can get to the first solo pretty quickly. So I would say, depending on how close you are to 16, maybe wait a tiny little bit to get started with the flight training. In the meantime, I would definitely recommend 2 things. I would recommend that you try to find someone who's doing training right now and observe. Sit in the back seat, observe their flights, and then learn what they're doing just by sitting back there. A lot of flight schools, if you're enrolled with them, they'll let you observe other flights. Maybe do a couple lessons in the meantime just to get in the system. But then find someone who's starting to work on their private, and then observe, that's what I did when I did my private pilot. And I didn't do it at 15, but I did it with somebody else. One of my roommates was also training. And what we would do is we would observe each other's flight all the time. And I got double the flight time. Now, it's not in my logbook, but at least in experience, I get to see everything that he did. And the funny thing was, I would sit back there and watch him make mistakes. And I said, why is he doing this? Why is he not looking at his altitude? Why is he not doing that? And sure enough, when I got to the front seat, and I did the same exact thing. But I remember what he had done, so I didn't do it. We would do cross countries. We would go in one direction, someone was flying, then we would switch, and then the other person would come back and fly the airplane. And that saved me a ton of money, actually, because I was able to get all the experience by just sitting back there. I would practice my radios in the back seat. And like when the controller would call, in my head, I would say, okay, this is what I would say. And that really helped. So I would do this as one thing at your age. And then the other thing I would do is ground school. I would learn everything you can on the ground, get it out of the way. Your written exam is good for 2 years. So if you plan to get your license at 17, then you could technically take the written exam now and it would still be valid the day that you turn 17. So learn all you can on the ground. That's definitely my tip. And it's free to do to a certain extent. It's pretty cheap, but observing is definitely another thing. Okay. Somebody else on YouTube is saying, my question is, I have completed the course. Now all the only thing is left is the 2 tests. Can you explain that page? I'm not sure. I understand the question. The only thing that's left is the 2 tests. There's only 1 test, okay? There should be only the 2 practice exam. I think you're talking about the practice exams are at the end of the course. You need to get 80% or more on your practice exam in order to get my endorsement. I would recommend that you do them on 2 different days. Do one day. If you do good, 80 or more, then go to take a break, come back the next day, do another one. If you get 80 or more, you're good to go. I'll send you your endorsement. If you don't get 80 on one of those 2, then I want you to go back and study those videos that are part of what you missed, the knowledge that you missed, and then go back and then do another practice test the next day. I see students sometimes that do 2 or 3 practice exams the same day, and I don't recommend that. I don't think that's a good idea at all. All it does is makes you memorize the database, and it gives you that false sense of security, and then it can be dangerous on exam day. So I don't recommend doing that. So. All right, next question. Oh, I see more questions popping up. Okay, Nick says, good afternoon, Greg. Would you guys perhaps in the future be looking at adding instructor oversight role? Definitely think it'd be worth looking into. I'm guessing you're talking about instructors that can help and talk to on a regular basis. Is that what you're asking, Nick? I'm not sure. But if it is, this is something that we've talked about as a business model. The difficulty is pricing the course right. We try to make the course as affordable as we can. Adding instructor on staff obviously makes it more expensive. So this could be an additional fee that you could pay in order to talk to an instructor. We could do that. But let me know, Nick, if I'll get back to that question in a second if you have more. Okay. Mike is asking, how long is your endorsement valid for? My endorsement actually doesn't expire. Once I give you the endorsement, you've technically received the training and you can go and take the test whenever you want. But I'll give you a but. But I recommend that you go and do the training as soon as possible. As soon as you get that endorsement from me, it means that you're ready. You're as fresh as you're ever going to be to take that exam. So I recommend that you go ahead and take the exam within maybe a week, maybe even less if possible. Because what happens, I've seen students do this over time. They get busy. I got the endorsement, I'm ready to go, and then they don't schedule the exam. And then they get rusty because that knowledge needs to be fresh in your head. So go take it as soon as you can, and then I'll guarantee that you get much better knowledge and a much better score at the end of it. Okay. I don't see any other questions right now, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to fill in a little bit for my test. Be sure you ask your question in here. If there's something that you don't understand in the course, maybe you're somewhere, or maybe even how to become a pilot. I know there's a lot of questions about how to become a pilot, where it's going to be. Okay, Nick replied, he said, I was thinking more of the likes that your flight instructor can access the course and monitor your progress. Yes. That's good. I like that. So yes, Nick is asking if we're going to have eventually a flight instructor access where flight instructors can actually check on your progress. And yes, this is something that we have in the works. We're actually working on creating a cool dashboard that's going to go along with the course in itself. And then flight instructors will be able to go in there, see your progress, give you maybe even assignments. So yes, this is absolutely something that we're working on because it's complex with the platform that we have. I don't have a deadline just yet. We're working on a very, very big project right now that I can't really talk about. It'll be announced probably within a month. Once we're done with that, I think we'll have a little bit more free time to start creating that dashboard. But yes, it's absolutely in the works right now. Okay. All right. I'm going to go and keep going here with my iPad. And I'm going to let me find one of those figure that is always confusing. Here's, where is it? I can see it. Where is it? All right, let's see. It's one of the figures for weight and balance. I don't know why I can't find it right now. I'm sure once I pull it up, you're going to be like, yes, I know exactly what he's talking about. It's not this one. Where in the world is it? Oh, is it this one? No, it's not this one. Although this one, people have questions all the time. It's not this one either. What? Well, that's something. Is it higher? No. Am I getting this confused with a commercial course? It could be in a commercial course, but I'm pretty sure it's in a private course. It's got a table at the bottom that has diagonal lines that you need to look at. Well, now I'm really filling the time in. Oh, there it is. It's right here. Okay. This one. Okay. Should I get to the question? Let me see the questions first, and then I'll get to this. When is the best time to get pilot insurance, and what coverage is best? Ooh, that's a good one, Nick. Insurance. Okay, let's talk about insurance. Two different types of insurance. One, because you own the airplane. And that's going to be the most uncommon because not many people own their own airplane. But if you're going to buy your airplane, then yes, you should definitely get insurance. And what coverage is best? I would say the best that you can afford, just like with your car. Typically, it's going to be, I think, around $1 million liability. And obviously, you can cover the aircraft for whole insurance as well. So there's two different types of insurance: liability insurance, which covers you in case you hit someone, in case somebody gets injured, or you, yeah, typically you creating damage to somebody else, okay, or injuries. And then there's whole insurance, which is going to cover your aircraft. So if you damage your aircraft, then you're going to have to pay for that. Now, that's if you own your airplane, but that's not the end of it. If you're renting the aircraft, then you need to talk to your flight school where you're renting to figure out what you are covered under. Typically, there is a minimum that you would have to pay in case a deductible, right? There is a deductible that you're going to have to pay in case something happens. At the flight schools I managed, it was always around $5,000. So when you sign that bottom line, when you're renting the airplane, what you're agreeing to when you sign that renter's agreement, and it should be in there, you basically agreeing to the fact that you're okay with a $5,000 deductible or $2,000 or whatever the school has in case something happens. So that's the bare minimum that you're going to pay. Now you're going to say, okay, cool. After this, I'm all covered. I'm renting the aircraft. I crashed the aircraft, and all I have to pay is $5,000, which seems like a high price, but maybe a low price compared to paying for the entire aircraft. Well, you might be wrong, because in most cases, those renters, those insurances that you pay, doesn't mean that you can't get sued by the insurance company that has the policy, and so that they can get their money back for you breaking the aircraft. So what I would recommend that you get is a renter's insurance on top of just having no insurance technically. When you rent the aircraft, you have this basic thing where you can pay $5,000 and get you deductible. I recommend that you get an additional insurance, which is called a renter's insurance, and it's going to be, I don't know, $50 to $100 a month probably, and that's going to cover you for anything else. And especially if somebody sues you, then you'll have that renter's insurance to cover you. There are places that do it. You can go on AOPA. They have articles and they have links to all that. But I definitely recommend that you do that. That's something that a lot of renters don't know. Now, I mentioned owning your own airplane, renting an airplane. As far as flight training is concerned, you need to talk to your flight school to find out what they have you covered, if you are covered for everything, and if there is a deductible when you train. Renting and training is two different things. I know you're renting the aircraft technically, but in most cases, renting and training is two different things. So make sure you talk to your flight school, and they might look at you weird because a lot of people don't ask those questions, but it's extremely, extremely important, especially if you're afraid of liability. So, Nick, thank you for asking. I hope this kind of answers your question. Other question: for getting my PPL, am I allowed to use the autopilot? Are you allowed and should you is two different questions. Yes, you should be allowed to use the autopilot when you do that. The flight school might not like it. The flight school might not let you use autopilot when you do your flight training. Personally, I think autopilot should be used after you get your PPL. You should be getting training on how to use it before you PPL. But the key of flight training is not to use autopilot. It's like saying, okay, I got a Tesla with full self-driving, and I'm going to go to my driving test. Can I use the autopilot full self-driving to pass my driving test? And the answer should be no, right? So I would say learn how it works, learn what it does, but also learn the limitations of the autopilot. I have a funny story. We just flew to Phoenix last week, and on the way back, the weather was horrible, absolutely horrible. Well, not horrible, I shouldn't say that. The updraft and downdrafts were horrible. We were flying at about 8,500 feet. And then all of a sudden we would lose 500 feet because of a massive downdraft. I would apply full power, pitch up to VY, and then we were still not climbing. We were still descending. And then all of a sudden we would hit an updraft, and then the aircraft would climb 1,500 feet per minute. This is a 172, which doesn't climb at that, that fast at that altitude. So I was telling the person I was flying with that if we had the autopilot on at that time, it would be extremely confused. It probably would have stalled the airplane because it would have tried to keep altitude. And by doing that, not changing the throttle, unless you have auto throttle as well, then we could have actually been in trouble. So this would have been an interesting flight to do autopilot testing on. But if you don't understand how the autopilot works, then you can get in trouble. So long answer, I'm sorry, I'm kind of long-winded, but learn how it works. Don't use it until you're ready, or use it very, very minimally in training. But after that, and then once you get your license, use it as much as you want to a certain extent. Keep your skills, your flying skills. Okay. The aviator says, where do I go to take the written exam after getting your endorsement? I'm going to put a link for you right here in the comment. This is my link. This is where you go to get the exam. It's called PSI, is the testing center that's approved by the FAA to do the testing, and you can get it right there. Okay, I see more comments in here. Mike says, I'm 37% of the course. Along with the course, will I need anything in addition to the E6B to take to the exam? Good question. No, not really. They'll give you a piece of paper. They're going to give you a pen and pencil and a bunch of white paper so you can take notes and do your scribbles. But no, other than that, that's it, really. I would take the E6B. If you have the CX3, I would take that instead of the E6B. But if you have an E6B, that's fine. I show you in the course how to use it. And then that's it, really. They'll give you everything else. They'll give you a simple calculator to do some of the basic math. You cannot take your cell phone with you. You can't take notes with you. You can't really take anything with you to go to the exam. So I would say, that's it. E6B and then piece of paper. All right. We caught up with the questions. I'm going to go back to my iPad. So looking back at the iPad, this is the question. This is the figure 67 here that always gets people confused. And the reason is because if you look at this figure right here, you'll see that there is weight on this column right here. We have moment, kind of those diagonal lines right here. And then down here, we have the center of gravity right here, okay? So let me clean this up. What you're going to get is questions from the FAA that say the aircraft is loaded with, that's the basic empty weight right here, that's the total moment right here. And then they're going to say, okay, you'll have 360 pounds of people on the front, you'll have 30 gallons, and then you'll have 20 pounds of baggage in the back. I'm making this up. So you'll have to go in here and do your computation. And in this figure, by the way, you can use the table method. If you've gone that far in the course, this is the table method where you would look at the table here, and then you'll have to interpolate, which is a bit of a pain. So you'd say, okay, 200 pounds. And then if it was 340 pounds, I don't remember what I said, then you have to add 200 pounds and 140 pounds because 340 is not on that list here. Then you'd have to add this with this. And all those moments, by the way, are over 100. So you notice here it says 1,652. Well, that's over 100. The actual, let me find a better pen here. The actual moment would be this 1,652. Nope, I'm sorry. Messing this up. 652 and then 2 zeros at the end because it's over 100. So 165,200. That would be the answer right here. So what you would do from here is you would add up all of your weight. So I don't remember what I said, but 2110 and then 340 pounds and then 40 gallons. So that would be 240 pounds of fuel and then 20 pounds of bag. I'm just making this up. Then you would get a total number here. And then you would add up all of your moments, and then you'd get a total as well. And then you would come to this table here, and you would say, okay, the total weight is, again, I'm making this up because I don't want to do the math. The total weight is 3,200 pounds. So you draw a line right here, that's 3,200 pounds, okay? And then you'd say, okay, we found that the moment is 2600, which in real life is 2 more zeros at the end of it, but that's not relevant here. 2600 is right here. You would draw a diagonal line right here, okay? And then the intersection between these two, if I zoom in, This right here is the intersection between the two. It's inside of the envelope, which is right here. So it means that the aircraft is loaded correctly. It means that our center of gravity is at the intersection between these two, parallel to these lines. Do you see these lines right here? That's our center of gravity. So where's the center of gravity here? I'm following parallel, okay? We have 80, 81, 82. It's about 81.5. That would be the center of gravity here. Now, you're going to say, could I have used the center of gravity? Yeah, you bet. You could have done whatever your total moment is here, divided by your total weight right here, and then that should have given you the answer close to it down in here. So there's different ways of doing this. There's different ways to answer those questions, but that's how you read it. So a 3-entry table. So if you wanted to do it this way, let me just erase real quick here. Oops. If it said your CG is 84, so you'd go right here and draw a line for 84. Oops. 84 right here. And then it said that your total weight is 3,500. Then right away you would know that doesn't work. It's outside of the envelope. That aircraft is not loaded correctly. So you'd have to redo the math. All right. I just want to make sure that this is understood. This is always a bit of a catcher because it has 3 different entry points in here. Okay. Follow-up question here. Nick says, are you allowed to take an electronic E6B or another calculator as a backup for the knowledge test? The only devices that are allowed at the moment that I know of that are electronic is the CX3 and the Sporty's E6B because they meet the requirements set by the FAA. So that's the only 2 electronic devices. Typically, even a simple calculator, the test examiner is not going to let you do that. So I don't recommend taking it. You could take an electronic E6B as a backup if you wanted to. They should let you take that. Mike mentioned... Okay, the aviator says, I'm on the PSI website. What exactly is the written exam called? So if you're doing the private pilot, it's going to be the PAR, private airplane, PAR. And then if you're doing instrument, it's going to be IRA. And if you're doing commercial, it's going to be CAX. So PAR, I'll type that for you. PAR, IRA, and CAX. And if you're doing drone stuff, UAG is the exam for the drones. Mike says $1 million liability minus plane price, no deductible is around, okay, $1,200 with AOPA. So that was for the insurance question earlier. So about $1,200 a year if you want to do, so $100 a month for insurance, which is not bad. It will cover you for, well, for a lot more money than that if you get in trouble. All right. Any more questions? We're about halfway through. Don't hesitate to put your questions in here. I'll answer anything and everything. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to our chart right here because let's see if I can find a good one. Oh, this is a good one right here, I think. Nope, that's not the one, but let me find the next one here. Nah, is it this one? Nope, it's not this one either. There's a bunch of them that are Toledo. Yeah, Toledo. This is a good one. So one of the questions on the exam has to do with this here. And the question says, at Toledo Express TOL, what is, I don't remember, something to do with the runways, I think. And students always go to that first one, and then they look up here, and they can't find the information because Toledo Express is right here. Remember that this document can have more than one airport. As a matter of fact, this one has 3 airports: Toledo Executive, Toledo Express, and Seagate Helistop. So make sure you read the right one. There's another one that I can't find it right now, but there's one that pops up all the time. Lincoln, yeah, this one, Lincoln Municipal. They ask, how far is this from the main city? And the answer, one of the answer is 4 miles northwest. Well, guess what? That's not the right answer. Why? Because they're asking about Lou City Municipal, which is 1 nautical mile. So I get this question every once in a while. We get it on the drone side as well. And we always say, just scroll down. Just scroll down. So I see another question pop up. Can I complete my training as Part 61 and end up working for an airline? Great question. Okay. Part 61 versus 141. The certificate that you get at the very end of it is exactly the same. It's a Part 61 private pilot, and it's going to look exactly the same whether you do your training 141 or 61. So the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. You can do whatever you want. The big advantage, in a way, to Part 141 when you go to the airlines is that if you ever failed a check ride for, let's say you were doing, you're at a flight school that has self-examining authority, which means that they have a check pilot on staff that will give you your check ride. If you failed that as Part 141, it doesn't go in your record as a failure because there is no such thing. It's never submitted to the FAA as a failure. If you fail your exam with the FAA under Part 61 or under Part 141 non-self-examining, which means you have to go with a DPE or with the FAA to do your check ride, then that's going to show on your records. That's really the only big advantage, other the fact that under Part 141 you get lower minimums. So, for example, you have the commercial is 190 hours as opposed to 250 when you do it. So 190 under Part 141. 250 under Part 61. That's one of the big difference. So, but other than that, no, I would say you can still become an airline pilot. It's not going to be an issue. Whatever works best for you. I did my private pilot Part 61 because I came in with experience with previous flight hours, and it was easier to do it under Part 61 because under Part 141, you have to do the entire curriculum at the school. Otherwise, they can't give you the credits. They can't say that you did it under Part 141. So it gets confusing, but it's definitely not a showstopper to go in here. Somebody says, I've heard you talking a lot about pilot insurance. What is pilot insurance? Pilot insurance is going to be, it's going to be, and I know you're young, it's going to be what covers you in case something happens, in case you're taxiing and you knock a taxiway light, maybe at the airport. That's damage. That damage is going to be covered by the insurance. If you don't have insurance, then you're going to be in trouble. Same with your car, right? You drive your car, you're going to need to get insurance. So that's really what it is. Make sure that you are covered when you do this. I know when you're younger, it's usually not as much of an issue, but as you get older, getting insurance is important. And don't get me wrong, when you're young, you should get insurance as well. But usually liability is not as much of a risk. Okay. Mike says, I am in law enforcement and I retire at the age of 50. I am 7 years away from retirement and working full-time. I cannot accommodate Part 141. That's totally fine. That's absolutely not a problem. You can do this on the side and yeah, definitely not a problem. Okay. All right, I think we caught up with the questions. Let's go back to the iPad. Let me see if I can find another one here that's always tricky. Yeah, this one right here. Okay. This one can get tricky for a variety of reasons. Because, well, let me decode this for you. Because sometimes the FAA gets tricky by asking questions kind of backwards. What you see in here is simple trigonometry in a way. We're going to enter, let me see how I'm going to get started with this. There's 4 different lines that we're going to draw on here. The first one is going to be the difference between the wind, where the wind is coming from, and when the runway is aligned. So let me do 220. That's where the wind is reported at 220 at 20 knots, and you have to land on one-way 18. Okay? So 220 minus 180, because that's where the wind is coming from, right? 180, that's where the runway is, 180. What is the difference between these two? It's 40 degrees. Okay. What does that mean? We're going to be using this line right here of 40 degrees. Do you see this 40 degrees right up here? I'm going to draw a line just like that to go all the way to the center. That's our line of 40 degrees. Okay. Now from here, what? We know that the wind is 20 knots. So we're going to look at these curved lines. Do you see these lines here? This line, this line, this line. These are the lines of wind speed. So we're going to take 20. We're going to draw the line. I'm drawing it all the way, but you don't have to do that. Now what? Now from here, you notice at the bottom here, we have crosswind component and we have headwind component. Okay? If I draw vertical lines, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to do it in blue. Just like that, straight line. That's easy to do on my software, but you can use a straight edge and you go right here. Then you have your two answers. Now look at the bottom here. This is 10, this is 20. Always, 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 with the FAA, you want to make sure that you know what the unit is for each of these lines. Sometimes the unit is 10, sometimes the unit is 2, sometimes it's 5. In this case, 10, halfway through here, that would be 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be 1 for each. So 11, 12, 13. What does this mean? It means that crosswind, we have 13 knots. 13 knots right here. And then up here, we have the same thing. Now this is headwind. 10, 20, 15. Let's call it 16. Okay. 16 knots right here of headwind. Why does it matter? Some people ask sometimes, why does it matter? Well, it matters because your aircraft has a maximum crosswind component. Typically on small general aviation aircraft, right around 17, 18, that's the maximum that the aircraft can handle when you're landing. So you have rudders, right? When you fly the aircraft, hopefully you guys are that far into the course. But the rudders that you're going to use, they have only so much deflection, which means that when we're fully deflected on the rudder, which we're going to use when we land to make sure we don't get off the runway, at one point, maximum deflection can only counteract 17, 18, 20, 25 knots of crosswind, whatever your aircraft is rated for. So we're going to use this right here. We're going to use this chart to make sure that when the wind is reported, that we don't exceed the components of the maximum crosswind component of the aircraft. So here, 13, in this case, probably okay for most aircraft, then you should be okay to fly. Now, remember, this is all dependent on your skills. Do I want to fly right at the limit of the aircraft? Probably not. 17 miles is not my limit. I'm not gonna be that person that says, oh yeah, I can go all the way to the limit. I'm going to have my personal limit a little bit less. If I have a flight student that's learning to fly, I'm going to give them a 7 knots of maximum crosswind. That's it. That's all you're allowed to. If it's more than 7 knots out there, I'm not going to send you on a solo to go by yourself because you can't handle it just yet. As you get closer to your check ride, then yeah, I'm going to bump that up to 10, 13, whatever it is. And then you'll get more comfortable over time. But this is important. You have to do this before you go fly so you understand what your crosswind is going to be. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Do you guys have more questions? Please leave them in the comments and I'll answer them. This is your chance. I know this is our first session, so if we need to end up a little bit early, I was going to do a full hour, but if we need to end up a little bit early because we don't have more questions, that's fine. We'll do that. And then I know next week there will be, or in 2 weeks, we do this every 2 weeks. We'll have hopefully more questions in here. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. Leave them down here. So like I said, this is available on YouTube. This is available on our Facebook group. You can subscribe to YouTube if you want. You'll get notification of when we post these. We're going to post them ahead of time, so you have time to see them, register for them. Also, I need to mention, because we're doing this every 2 weeks, when we're not doing this, we're going to have an episode of what we call the Flying New Guy. And the Flying New Guy is Jason. If you haven't seen Jason just yet, Jason is one of our employees, and he's getting his private pilot certificate. And we're going to record his training. We're going to record him going through ground school, asking questions. So every 2 weeks, when we're not doing this, we're going to post a video of Jason sitting right here in this set and asking questions to me and to Tom, who's our other flight instructor on staff, and we're going to help him. So we're going to do kind of a ground lesson based on things that Jason has is not understanding or whatever it is, and this should be pretty beneficial for you. It's a bit more scripted in a sense, even though I'm trying not to get the questions ahead of time so I can be fresh, but we'll be using the iPad as well and going over the things that might be more questionable throughout the course. So make sure that you tune in for that. That's pre-recorded. That's available on the YouTube channel. So make sure that you go on there and check. I see a few more questions here. Mike says the schedule for live shows shows 3 p.m. So that means that you are on the West Coast. YouTube always shows you only the time where you're located, which is kind of weird. It doesn't give you a time zone. So if it says 3 p.m., it's 3 p.m. local for you. These are recorded at 4 o'clock my time, which is mountain time. If you're on the East Coast, it's going to be at let me see, 6 o'clock on the East Coast. So, yep. And other question, let me see. I see another question here. I don't have a specific question, just did it. But can you quickly touch on pressure and density altitude? Ooh, that's a good one. Let me go here. Pressure, altitude, density, altitude. Okay. So I want you to think, I'm trying to think, I know how to explain it, but I don't want to do it the way that I do it in the course. I want to explain it differently because typically the confusion with pressure altitude and density altitude is because people think it's a physical altitude, and it's not. It's a theoretical altitude. Let's take pressure altitude out of the picture for now because pressure altitude is a step to get to density altitude. Density altitude is what matters. I live at 5,000 feet elevation. It's cold outside and the pressure is low. The aircraft that I have at 5,000 feet elevation is going to perform not nearly as good as it would if we were at sea level. Hopefully that's a given, right? The higher you go in elevation, the worse the aircraft performance is because of pressure and temperature, okay? Because of density. So those factors, that performance of the aircraft is affected by pressure and temperature. As it gets hotter, typically the performance gets worse. Think about you, if you're a runner, if you're anybody active, when it gets hot, you don't perform nearly as well. Pressure also has a major effect, okay? So as we get to higher altitude, the pressure drops, and as the pressure drops, then that also affects our performance. So what happens is this. At 5,000 feet altitude, my aircraft may not necessarily perform as if it were at 5,000 feet elevation. Instead, it may perform as if we were at 8,000 feet. If you go to Prescott, which is at 5,000 feet elevation, in the summer, the aircraft is not going to perform nearly as well. It's going to climb. It's going to be sluggish. I mean, it's sluggish regardless, but it's going to be even more sluggish, okay? But if the conditions are right, it is possible that my aircraft is going to feel like it's flying at 3,000 feet or 2,000 feet elevation. Tom next door, our flight instructor, he flew to Flagstaff a couple of days ago to do a video, and he came back and he said, "Man, it was like -2 and -3 degrees out in Flagstaff, which is way colder than standard, which means that his performance was actually awesome." He said it felt like Flagstaff is at 7,000 feet elevation, which is challenging. And he said, I think it was like 4,000 feet density altitude. So that equivalent altitude, that theoretical altitude, is the density altitude. That's why we calculate it, because we want to know how our airplane is going to perform. The altitude of the airport alone is not enough. Now you're going to say, what about pressure altitude? Well, pressure altitude is a step to get to the density altitude. We have altitude, Okay, if we can go to the iPad real quick, I'll write that down for you right there. We go from altitude. Let's say our airport is at 5,000 feet elevation. Then we use pressure. How is pressure affecting us? So we're going to apply a factor to the altitude, which is going to give us pressure altitude. You guessed it. Okay. And let's say that pressure altitude, because of the way the pressure is going to give us 6,000 feet elevation, or 6,000 feet pressure altitude, equivalent altitude, theoretical. And from here, we're going to do another conversion, and we're going to we're going to account for temperature. And from here, we're going to get density altitude. Okay? Now, if it's very cold outside, that 6,000 feet pressure altitude here might turn back down to 5,000 feet. It might even turn back down to 4,000 feet. Now, if it's hot, that factor might go up to 7,000 feet or 8,000 feet. Okay? So that's really what it is. That's really what those terms are. Now, the confusing part always with students is this. They say, well, as I climb, what happens? The pressure decreases, okay? And the density decreases. So they say, well, a low density altitude means my performance is not going to be good. Don't think about it this way, okay? Density altitude has really nothing to do with density. I hate to say it this way. It does, but it has nothing to do with the fact that the density changes outside, okay? So think about it as an altitude. It's a theoretical altitude that's going to give you the performance of the aircraft. The higher the number, the worse it is. We don't want a high density altitude. We want it as low as possible. I hope this helped. This was a little winded, but I wanted to make sure, because this is always a very confusing section here. Okay. Another question that says, can you explain the rollout and runway roll calculation? Let me see if I can get to this right here. And Bo says altimeter still always reads true altitude. Yes, absolutely. You're right. That thing that I have here, this altitude here, that's always going to be what's on the altimeter. It's the density altitude and pressure altitude are only theoretical numbers, only used for performance calculation. That's it. Otherwise, you're right. Your altimeter is always going to show 5,000 feet in Prescott, just because that's the way it is. Okay, Nick is asking, can you explain the rollout and runway roll calculation? Yes, let me get to that. Nick, are you talking about maybe this figure right here? Hopefully I can rotate. Yes, I can. Okay, rotate clockwise. Hopefully you're talking about this figure right here. So this one is actually, that's a cruise. I'm sorry, that's not the same. What is this? Landing distance? Yes, okay. It doesn't really matter, quite frankly, if it's landing or takeoff distance. They're all kind of the same, but I know, yeah, he said yes, okay. I know this is sometimes confusing here. Let me get to that. Okay. The reason this is confusing, by the way, is because in real life, you really wouldn't have a chart like this. It'd be much more complex, by the way, in real life, because there would be more than one weight in here. But the key here with the FAA questions, and I don't have a specific question in mind for this one, but I'll run you through all the little details here. But we have only one weight, so 99%, 100% sure that the FAA is going to say, well, the aircraft weighs 1,600 pounds. Okay, cool. It's already in here. There's only one entry anyway. And then they're going to give you several things. You notice here in the pink, we have at sea level, at 2,500, at 5,000, at 7,500, okay? And then they also give you a temperature with that. That's kind of the standard temperature at those altitudes, okay? Sea level, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, that's standard, okay? And then we go and decrease X number of degrees per 1,000 feet. Now, usually in aviation, we have degrees Celsius, but for some reason, they're using Fahrenheit here. So the question might be, and this would be a simple question, the aircraft weighs 1,600 pounds, and we are at sea level. Temperature outside is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the ground roll? Pretty straightforward. Sea level, 59 degrees, 1,600 pounds. Ground roll, this thing here, is 445. That's your answer. And then they're going to say, total to clear a 50-foot obstacle. And that's a little bit longer. Why? Because here's your runway. I'm going to try to do it in 3D. High tech. So that's your runway right here. And what you want to know most of the time is, what does it take to clear 50 feet? Why 50 feet? Because that's a pretty standard height of an object, right? Tall tree, whatever it is, at the end of the runway. So the ground roll would be, oh, there you go. Producer Ethan is telling me you can't see that. The ground roll would be the time that this is your aircraft right here, you're about to take off, you get wheels, right? The ground roll would be this distance until you lift off the ground right here. Wheels off the ground, that's your ground roll right here. And then, so that would be, in this case, 445 feet. And then from here, we would have the distance to clear 50 feet. So we're going to be taking off right here, clear 50 feet. Then that would be 1,075. So if you knew that this runway is short and you knew that there's an obstacle at the end of the runway that's 50 feet or something close to that, then you'd want to make sure that you can clear that object. Now, does that happen a lot in the United States? Not really, because we have a lot of long runways. And if you go to other countries, it might. If you go fly backcountry, yeah, you might want to know, what it's going to take. Now, that's the easy answer here. Now you're going to say, well, what if the temperature is not 59 degrees? Well, look right here. You have notes. And the first note here says, number 2, it says increase the distance by 10% for each 60-degree temperature increase above standards. Okay, above standards. So you would know that if it increases, it says 10%. Let me use this pen. What did it do? Doop. It says 10% for 60 degrees. The way I read this is 1% increase for every 6 degrees. How often is it going to be 60 degrees over standard? Never. How often is it going to be 6 degrees above standard? Well, it can happen. 12 degrees, whatever it is. If it's 12 degrees over standard, then you need to do 2%. Okay, and if it's 9 degrees Fahrenheit over, then you need to do 1.5%. So that's important. Those notes right here are important. And then sometimes they're going to say, you have a, let's see. I'm trying to read the notes on this one. They have different notes depending on the figure. This one says, decrease the total distance shown by 10% for each 4 knots of headwind. I think there's a question in there that says, what if the headwind is 12 knots? Well, if it's 12 knots and it's, what did I say, it's 10% for every 4 knots, then you would decrease your thing by 30%, 3 times more. So you have to pay attention. If you don't pay attention to these 2 at least right here, you're going to get the question wrong. And I guarantee you that the FAA has that answer in there wrong because they know that you're going to mess it up. So, and then the last one here, it says for operation on a dry grass runway, increase the distance, both the ground roll and the total 50 foot by 20% of the total to clear 50 foot obstacle figure. So you would use that. Okay. I hope that answers the question. Terry says, what is the best way to determine class Gulf airspace? That's a good question. Let me get to my flight figures right here. Let me find, oops, what did I do? Where did it go? There it is. Okay. Let me find this one right here. The best way to figure out class Gulf airspace is to think about what is class Gulf. Class Gulf is everything that's not A, B, C, D, or E. So the most airspace in the country is class E, class Echo. And class Echo, anywhere in the country starts where? It starts at 1,200 feet AGL, okay? anywhere in the country, Class E starts at 1,200 feet AGL, unless otherwise designated, okay? Unless otherwise shown. So I picked this figure because it's pretty open, all right? Let's say we're right here. Let me do it in pink, you can see. Right here, okay? If you're in this area, where does Class Echo start? If you're in this area right here, Class Echo starts at 1,200 feet AGL because there's no other indication that there's no other airspace. This is middle of nowhere, okay? So here, Class E starts at 1,200 feet. And it goes all the way to long ways. It goes all the way to 18,000 feet, which is where Class Alpha starts. So what is below Class E? Well, everything that's not A, B, C, D, or E is going to be Class Golf. So Class Golf is going to be below less than 1,200 feet AGL, above ground level in this case. Let's do another example. Let's take a look at this little airport here, Barnes. I'm going to clear up this area. Oops. And then let's do this Barnes. Okay, so let's say that you're right here. Where does Class E now starts? And it's always the question, right? Why you're asking me about Class G, and why am I telling you about Class E? Because, well, typically Class G is right below Class E, where it's everything else. So in this case, Class E starts where? If we look at this, this is Class E starting at 700 feet AGL, which means that Class Golf, inside of all of this right here, starts at the surface and goes all the way to, but not including, 700 feet AGL. Surface to 700 feet. That's where your Class Golf is. Golf, surface to 700 feet AGL. Now let's do another one. Jamestown, right here. This right here is what? Dash magenta. That's Class E starting at the surface. Where does Class Golf start here? Nowhere, because Class E goes from the surface all the way to 18,000 feet. So there's no Class Golf here at all. Now, what about here in this area? Oh yeah, we have Class Golf here starting at the surface all the way to 700 feet. AGL, same example as what we had here. All right. I hope that helps. Basically, anywhere we don't have A, B, C, D, or E. Okay. All right, I think it's going to be a wrap, folks. It's 5 o'clock. Well, it's 5 o'clock here at least. And we've been going on for an hour. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Same place, same location. Bring your questions, bring your friends, and then we'll answer all of those. See you then.